Hello, my name is Jessica Medina. A lot of you know me already. I'm an accredited financial counselor, but I am also a licensed attorney. And in my former life as a lawyer, I practiced in big law for a number of years. I then went to the federal government and worked in the Securities and Exchange Commission for about 5 years. And that's where I found my love of personal finance. And that's where I made the decision to become a financial counselor. I graduated from Columbia Law School in 2004. I graduated as a single mom of twins, and I had about $200,000 in student loans. So I am very familiar with this struggle and with this scenario. And spoiler alert, I'm still paying them off by choice. It's a conscious choice that I make because, and we'll get into kind of the numbers of how that works for me. But just to give you a sense that there are many paths to the end of the road. But I'm an early retirement enthusiast. I'm in the middle of my semi-retirement right now. And I'm also a competitive karaoke enthusiast. So you may see things that I post or talk about with respect to my competitive karaoke career, which unfortunately is on hold because of pandemic. But the Accredited Financial Counselor program is a certification that you get through the Association for Financial Counseling and Planning Education. And that's an organization that is really take it to heart that you want to make sure that you're not just working with money, you're also working with people. So being a financial counselor is a little bit different than being an accountant or an investment advisor, somebody who really is just interested in the numbers. I'm really interested in you and making sure that those numbers work for you. And I've been working with financial counseling clients since 2018. And the best way to get in touch with me is through LinkedIn. I'm on there all the time. I'm posting all the time, but people message me. They message me questions. They message me, questions for advice, and I always respond to my messages. So if you're looking for me, come find me over there. So you guys may be familiar, right? Student loan debt is a huge problem in this country. The average student loan debt for all people across the United States hovers around $35,000. But we as lawyers all know that we have a very special situation and our number is very different, right? So the average law student graduates with about $145,000 in student loans, and that's the average. Right? So that's taking into account all the people who have way more than that and the people who have way less or zero, right? So to have an average at 145,000 is pretty depressing at a level. And really it is a crushing burden that we really need to start addressing in this country. I'm not going to speak to the policy arguments around student loan debt. I'm really just going to try to give you strategies for how to deal with the situation as it currently stands. But we'll see if anything changes on the broader spectrum as the months and years go by. But so let's just get into, what are some strategies that we can implement in terms of dealing with what could be, a mortgage-sized debt that you graduate with as you become a lawyer. There's three main strategies that I always talk about with my clients. There's the repayment as soon as possible strategy. Those are for my go-getters who hopefully are making a very healthy salary, maybe don't have so much student loan debt and they can tackle it quickly. There's a number of forgiveness programs that apply to federal loans only, and those have become very popular over the past decade or so when they finally were implemented. We've now started to see people be able to actually get to the end of that road. So forgiveness programs, of course, another strategy that you can implement. And then what I'd like to call repay your way. This is going to be some sort of combination of techniques and strategies that you use based on your own financial situation. Like I said, I graduated law school with 2 little boys in tow. So supporting a family and trying to aggressively pay down my student loans didn't really work for me. And I was in big law. So, it really does depend on what your personal situation is. And that's why, figuring out a way to repay it on your own schedule is really important for many of my clients. And it was really important for me. So general guidelines, right? These are just guidelines. It's not rules in stone, but generally speaking, if you are making and earning a yearly salary that is greater than your overall debt load, you can probably consider a repay ASAP method. You should hopefully have enough buffer in your, in the difference between the money that you're bringing in and the money that your lifestyle is costing you, that you may be able to shoulder some really aggressive student loan payments. And you might be able to knock those out in 3, 5, or 7-year timeline. If your debt is larger than your annual salary, it was actually larger than mine when I graduated, but forgiveness programs didn't exist back then. If that's your situation, you really want to think about how you can take advantage of forgiveness programs. And I'm going to go through a little bit. I don't have time today to go through all of them and all the ins and outs. That's a full student loan training that I do for over an hour. But I will give you at least a sense of kind of what the forgiveness programs look like and which ones might work for you. If you're in the middle and your current debt load is about equal to what you're bringing in every year, you're probably going to want to think about something that's a little bit more flexible and that has some sort of a combination of these elements to make sure that we can get you a plan that will get you out of student loan debt, whether that includes an element of forgiveness, an element of repayment, and figuring out how we're going to get all of that done in a certain time period. So when you are thinking about going down the road of repaying your loans as soon as possible, there are a few things that you always want to consider. Number one, you're probably going to want to refinance at some point, and probably as early as possible if you can, depending on where the interest rates are. Right now is an amazing time to refinance student loans. Interest rates are in the tank. They're so low right now. So depending on your income, depending on your credit, you may be able to qualify for really low interest rates on student loans that otherwise had higher interest rates from when you graduated law school. So refinancing is always a great idea if you're thinking about trying to repay them in their entirety. Now, that being said, when you refinance a federal loan, you turn it into a private loan. And that's always a really, really important decision that you want to think through very carefully before you make that move. Refinancing a federal loan into a private loan is an irreversible decision. You never get to go back to the federal loan landscape, which means that you lose all of the benefits that go along with having federal student loans. There's really only two types of student loans. There's federal and then there's private. And there's a myriad of kinds inside those two categories, but those are the two that you want to pay the most attention to because it will let you know what kinds of relief programs you may have access to. And the federal loan programs have a lot of relief characteristics that are very helpful to borrowers throughout their career, including forgiveness. That's not true of private loans. That being said, especially in today's environment, you can absolutely get much better interest rates and save tens of thousands of dollars in interest over the life of your loan if you refinance. That being said, determining whether or not repaying your loans as soon as possible is always going to be dependent on what is your lifestyle. These are going to be aggressive payments that you're going to be making. And so, you need to make sure that you have a lifestyle and a personal financial situation that can absorb those kinds of monthly payments. It may not be for an extended period of time, but it is going to be longer than 2 years. So you want to think really carefully about whether your lifestyle can support those kinds of aggressive payments before you decide to go down the road of repaying them as quickly as possible. Another thing that I always want my clients to make sure that they're paying attention to is their own income security, right? When you make the decision that you're going to go down the road of repaying your loans as quickly as possible, you're going to refinance them, you're going to turn them into all as low interest as you can get private loans, you are now locked in to that payment term for the life of that loan. So you want to make sure that you're going to be able to handle those aggressive payments for the entire term. And if there's any question about whether you will have a job in 3 years or whether your income will be the same, whether you'll be able to sustain that level of aggressive payment, that's really important when you're making this decision. And so, of course, I have clients who feel very secure in their income. They feel like they're in a good practice area, they're at a great firm that is going to be supporting them, and that they can take these 3, 5, 7, 10 years to be very aggressive, knowing that they will be making a certain amount of money that they can afford those monthly payments. When I have clients who aren't so sure about what their career trajectory is, taking on a burden like that and locking yourself in for a number of years may be detrimental because you really can't get back out. You don't have access to those relief programs anymore. So always something to think about. Oh, now my slides don't want to move. There we go. All right. The second strategy, forgiveness, right? This is kind of a new kid on the block to me. We didn't have these programs around when I was graduating from law school, but I have a number of clients who are participating right now, and they really do make a lot of sense for a lot of people. There's income-driven repayment forgiveness. This is a global term for a number of different income-driven repayment plans, which basically lets you use however much money you're making to figure out what your student loan payment is going to be, and it's a reflection of your actual income. And after 20 or 25 years, depending on the different program that you're in, the entire balance of your loans is forgiven. This only applies to federal loans. As we mentioned, forgiveness generally only applies to federal loans, but it can be a very good deal if you can handle paying, being saddled by your student loans for 20 to 25 years and making those payments. The other thing that you always want to watch out for with the income-driven repayment is it's not a tax-free benefit at the end of your payment plan. So you get to the 20 or 25-year time period, you've been making your payments diligently, you've been in the right income-driven repayment program the entire time, and now it's time to ask for forgiveness. The balance of your loans will be forgiven. However, that balance will be treated as though it was earned income in that year. So if you're in a 25% tax bracket when your $300,000 balance of federal loans are finally forgiven, well, you're going to have a pretty big tax bill that year because the federal government will treat it as though you made an extra $60,000, $65,000 that year. So you do want to be aware of that. And what I always work with my clients is coming up with a plan, right? We have decades to work out something. So let's prepare for what that tax bomb may be. There are situations where you would not have to suffer any tax penalties, but you would really need to be insolvent. And I know I may have some tax attorneys on this call who might be able to help people work through that kind of a situation. But really what we want to do as a financial counselor, my job is to make sure that you're prepared for it. We have some time, we're going to come up with a plan, and we're going to make sure that you're going to pay as little as possible over the life of your forgiveness plan. And at the end, you'll be ready for whatever happens. Public service loan forgiveness also only applies to federal loans and is basically like the ultimate forgiveness program. It's 10 years of payments while you're working for an appropriate employer and you're making those payments in the right kind of payment program. And after 10 years of payments, everything is forgiven, completely tax-free. So if this is a program that you can take advantage of, any of my clients are interested in government work, they're interested in working for nonprofits, they're interested in any state or local government positions, this is absolutely a wonderful place to get your loans forgiven if you can follow all of the tenets of the program. You may have heard that there has been some problems in terms of people actually getting forgiveness through this program. However, it only started in 2007. And so we're just now getting people who have an actual 10 years of payments to work with. And unfortunately, they're finding that they didn't tick one of the boxes along the way. It does work when you actually have all of your documents in order and you've been keeping track and you've been keeping tabs on the federal government and making sure they're doing their job of logging all your payments appropriately. But given all of the flack that the program has gotten over the past couple of years, I think a lot of people may be very wary to try to participate, but it is possible. I have anecdotal evidence. I'm in a lot of lawyers groups of people who get that forgiveness letter after their payments have all been certified. And it really is exactly as miraculous as it sounds. It's completely forgiven. And again, only applies to federal loans. The last forgiveness program is teacher programs. I don't often talk about these with my lawyer clients because the maximum that can be forgiven is around $17,500. So that often doesn't really make the kind of dent in law school debt that you would love to see from a forgiveness program. But I always mention it just in case it is something that any of my lawyers are considering. And then we have repay it your way. What I really want to talk to my clients about when we're figuring out their own creative solutions to paying down their student loan debt is think about where your finance is going to be over the course of your career. Are you planning on remaining in private practice? Are you planning on going into the government at some point? Are you planning on going into a nonprofit? Are you planning on leaving the practice of law entirely and doing something completely different? Also, what is your lifestyle? How many people are you supporting? What else do we need to be doing with your money during your lifetime to make sure that we're attacking all of your goals? Student loan debt is very emotional, and people carry a lot of guilt around how much they may have, how long they anticipate they will have it, how they're even capable of paying off this degree that maybe they don't even want anymore. But at the core, we have other things going on too, right? We want to be able to live our lives and enjoy our lives. We certainly want to be able to enjoy the later part of our lives where we might not want to be working all of the time. And so that's something that I always want to talk through with my clients when we're coming up with some creative strategies. I touched on this already a little bit. We really need to figure out how you feel about your student loan debt because different people feel differently about it. I always took the position, look, I took out this money. I took out as much money as I possibly could. But part of the reason why I did that was because I was supporting kids when I was in law school. And I didn't feel like I had a lot of means to support my family while I was going to school full time and trying to start my career. And so I just ended up taking out a lot of student loans, but I didn't feel that guilty about it until I saw what the monthly payments were. And then I just felt mad because I thought to myself, I worked so hard. Why is this so expensive? What is going on? And why can't I afford it? I'm working at a top law firm. I'm making the most money that you're supposed to be able to make as a young attorney, and I still can't make all these numbers work. So, I took a longer road. As I said, I'm still paying down my federal loans because their interest rate is so absolutely low. It's less than 2%. I will pay off everything else in my life. I will invest. I will make long-term savings goals a priority before I'm going to pay down that debt. It will get paid down eventually. I have plans, of course, but it's really not a high priority for me because I have other things in my life that I want to focus on. And lastly, flexibility. You want to make sure that as you progress through your career, as changes happen, as you decide you want to be doing different things, or maybe your family grows, or maybe you want to relocate, all of those things are really important to remember and to be able to revisit this decision at different times in your life and change course if you need to. I originally had a plan to have all of my loans paid off. From the time that I entered the government, I had a 10-year plan. I was very excited about it. And then I decided, you know what? I would like to semi-retire instead. I'm going to put those federal loans on the back burner. I'm going to aggressively pay down all of my private loans because those interest rates were not as great. But I'm not going to make these federal loans a priority anymore. Me being able to leave the practice of law was a greater priority for me. And so that's what I saved up for. So you really do have to give yourself some room to be flexible and to change plans and to be ready to adjust however you need to so that you can really incorporate whatever the trajectory of student loan payment is going to be in your life with everything else that you have going on. Totally simple, right? That's easy. Now you have everything you need to figure it all out. That is not how this works. It's okay. It's not simple. It's not easy. I didn't even tell you guys all the different income-driven repayment programs that there are, right? We just scratched the surface here. And if you've been struggling with your student loans, please know that you are not alone because it is a complicated system. I'm not sure why they make it as complicated as it is, but it really is a lot going on, and you want to be very careful because there are some consequences for actions that are irreversible and can be very expensive. So you do want to have a pretty good sense of what's going on with your money and what's going on with your loans before you make any decisions. But so in order to make your own plan, right, this is all work that you can do on your own. You don't need professional help. That being said, it might be nice, given everything else you have on your plate, to be able to talk through with someone else about what your plan is and how you think it works in your overall life and your career trajectory. But you're always going to want to start by just tracking down everything that you have, right? We want to know where all the federal loans are. Those should all be reflected on studentaid.gov. And then to track down all of your private loans, other than checking the bills you get from your service provider, you can also check your own credit report. They should all be on there. And that way you know exactly who you need to call to figure out how much you owe, what your payments are, and what kind of programs are available. And then you just want to make a list out of everything that you have, the different types, what the monthly payment is, and figure out how you're doing. And then you have access to a number of online calculators that will help you figure out which repayment plan makes the most sense for you. Should you be going for forgiveness? Should you try to refinance them and repay them as quickly as possible? So there are a lot of free resources out there to help you think through these issues. But you also need to take into account your own career trajectory, your own personal financial situation, and how you feel about all of this debt and how quickly you might want to get rid of it just for your own personal issues. And you're going to check the refinance rates, see if you could get a really better deal and have a better trajectory of paying off your loans by whatever rates you might be able to qualify for. These are going to be based on your current income and also your credit history. So if you are just out of law school and you don't have a lot of credit history, you might not be able to qualify for some of those great rates that are out and about right now, but you may. So that's something that you would just need to check because it is personal. But right now, interest rates really are as low as they've been in decades. So if you're ever going to get a low rate, now is really an ideal time. And then you want to check in periodically with yourself. Like I was saying, your career isn't going to be stagnant, your life isn't going to be stagnant, and you want to make sure that you're checking in to see if your current plan still works for you, or whether you need to shift gears a little bit, focus on something else for a little while, and then go back to student loans. It's okay. It doesn't have to be a straight and narrow path. There's a lot of ways to deal with it. And I'm hoping that we have some folks on here today that might be able to share stories of ways that they've dealt with their own student loan debt. And if we don't, I have my own story, of course, and I'm happy to share it with you. But I always like hearing what other people have done. And then also, if you guys have questions, of course, I want to make sure that we get answers to those. And if anybody has, a particular student loan issue that they would really like help working through, we have time today, and that's what today is all about. So it's now time for questions and conversations. I know that was a lot of information. Believe me, I usually do something like this that just takes an hour to an hour and a half to go through all of the different tenets of student loan repayment strategies. So I appreciate you guys taking the super digested version. But if anyone has particular questions that they wanted to have answered, I would love, you can pop them in the chat. You can unmute yourself. I'm hoping that I've given everyone the power to unmute themselves. But this really is supposed to be a conversation, and I would love to hear from you guys.
Hello, Jessica. So question for you, fantastic presentation, by the way. So how have you, what's your personal plan, or what do you recommend for others who are still burdened with loans, but you decided I'm going to leave my law practice, and you still have a life. You have your competitive karaoke, whatever you want to call it. And so you figured out how to make sure that you have the happy life and lifestyle that you want, and you have kids to support and a family, but you still have a bunch of loans to pay off. So how are you managing that?
Oh, so I've also gone through a lot of different phases with my student loan repayment strategies. When I was practicing at my law firm, I actually didn't max out my payments. I spent more time maxing out my 401k contributions and my investments because I wanted that time for those to grow. Also, I feel for everybody who graduated recently, or really in the past 10 years, my interest rates were nothing like what people are dealing with right now. My federal loans were refinanced, consolidated down to below 2%, like I said, so they've never been very high. Even my private loans have been hovering around 5% or lower for most of their lifetime. So nothing like the 8 or 9% that I see some of my clients coming to me with now. So that being said, I didn't really make it a priority. And by the time I got to the government and took a huge salary cut in order to take that job, I thought to myself, wow, I am never going to pay off my loans if I don't start doing something because forgiveness wasn't an option for me. That wasn't on the table for any of my loans. I have very special old federal loans that don't qualify for any of the programs. So when I got to the Securities and Exchange Commission, that's when I really got into personal finance generally. And I just came up with a payment plan that was going to give me 10 years to knock everything out. I was paying extra every month on my private loans. The SEC also has an excellent student repayment assistance program. So they were helping me pay down my federal loans. So I kind of balanced it that way. I had the SEC pay my federal loans. I was able to really attack my private loans. And then I wanted to leave law completely. And that wasn't, I ended up doing it faster than the 10-year timeline. So I extended out some of my payments on my federal loans. And I also tapped into other investments that I already had. I think they're student loans and any kind of debt are just like any other type of liabilities you have on your balance sheet. And you get to pay for those liabilities with other assets that you may have on your balance sheet. So I have one of my plans really was to sell my house. And in the sale of my house, I was gonna knock out whatever was left of my student loans. That was my plan because I didn't want to live here anyway. The DC metro area is very nice. It's also extremely expensive. And I don't know that I would want to retire here if I'm not a lawyer. It really is a lawyer town. It's wonderful, but it is a lawyer town. And so I wanted to be somewhere sunny like you, Ariella.
Yeah, this is working out. You should join me over here.
Exactly. And so knowing that was kind of more in my future, I thought, I could totally sell this place and just it's only going to take a portion of the profit, right? Real estate is a great investment. And it's an investment just like any other. There's risk involved, but there's also growth. And so if you have enough time to build up other investments and other assets, you should feel free to leverage those against the liability that is your student loans. You don't have to just toil to pay them off. A lot of student loan repayment success stories have a large bulk payment made at some point. It's not just day in, day out, month by month, just paying it down and like scraping like a whittler or something against a thing of wood. Sometimes you chop down half the tree at once and it feels really good. It's a little bit easier and it does really make a huge difference. But so, in thinking of my entire financial picture, I looked at what other ways could I possibly attack this, even if, it does take out some of my real estate profit that I would have made off of my house. And so that's kind of how I approached it when I finally really dug into all of my own personal finance issues.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, Jessica.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead. Hey, Lauren.
Hi, I actually, thank you so much for this presentation. I graduated in May. And I found this webinar Zoom through LinkedIn. One of my classmates had liked it. And I was like, what? I could really use this. I recently found out that, well, first of all, I am planning on going the public service loan forgiveness program. And I've already checked all of that out. And currently I'm clerking and I'm on the trajectory, have all of the correct federal loans. I'm working on getting that certified. So I guess maybe my next question is, I personally am really bad with money. It's a huge stressor in my life in terms of, it's not that I have a spending problem, it's more of like just growing up, it was always a point of contention. And so there's a lot of emotions around it. Mm-hmm. And so when trying to figure out what to do for my future, I'm not really sure where to start because I have absolutely no idea as far as, because I feel like I should be taking part in, like, I'm part of the state system and they have a great retirement system. And I already technically have a pension because I work for the state of New Jersey. And so it's like, I feel like I need to be capitalizing on these opportunities, but I don't know where to start. And like all the advice that I've found online is always repay your loans first. That's like the greatest investment you can do. But in my case, that's not really, like, it doesn't make sense to me to make payments on something that I plan on having forgiven. But then the safe side is like, oh, we'll make payments just in case you don't qualify. But then it doesn't make sense to me. So I'm not really sure where to start, or if you have any resources that you recommend that I check out. Yeah.
I do have a number of resources, and they're going to be included in the slides as well. I'll have links to different websites that have really good information about, trying to figure out, what kind of student loan repayment plan may work for you, and professionals that work specifically in this space. I will tell you, Lauren, my clients often come to me not just with student loan questions, they have overall money questions, right? I'm a financial counselor, and yes, I do student loans, and it's a special area for me, especially given how much I struggled with it myself. But generally speaking, the people who I generally work with have more than just student loan issues, right? They have trouble with spending or managing their money, or just trying to deal with their competing priorities. And it sounds like, there might be a little bit of that going on for you. I will say I do not subscribe to the guideline of always pay down your student loans first. I'm a living, breathing embodiment that doesn't have to be the way that you do it. And so, maybe it's risque, maybe I'm controversial. I don't think that student loans have to be your number one priority, especially if you have federal loans. We have no idea what's going to happen over the next, several years. And the landscape for federal loans themselves have changed in my lifetime. We didn't have those forgiveness programs before, and we do now. So that's a really huge shift in terms of what's available to people. But also, you're absolutely right. If your plan is to have things forgiven, your main goal is to pay as little as possible. That is your goal, to send as little money as possible to the student loan people. And if you're concerned that maybe, 2 years before you reach public service loan forgiveness, you're going to switch careers and go into private practice and not be able to qualify anymore, you can put that money in a savings account and wait and see if you want to make a lump sum payment in the future. But at least you won't send the money to the government. I can pretty much guarantee whatever they do with student loans, they're not going to give anybody any money back, right? This is just going to be, maybe they'll forgive what you haven't paid yet, but no one's sending you a refund. They don't really like to do that. So I would absolutely keep your money.
Okay, just a quick question on that. So I checked with them and I qualified for the income-based repayment options, the 2 or 3 different options, but based on, I spoke to them this morning and my payment would be $0, which to me blows my mind. I don't really understand how that works, like how they calculate it, but apparently I wouldn't make, currently at my salary, I don't make enough. So because I had already budgeted to make like a $400 payment a month, what should I be doing with that money instead? Like, is there a specific type of like savings I should be putting it in? Or, because it's already carved out in my mind of, okay, I was going to make a student loan payment, but I guess if I don't have to make anything, what do I do with this?
Oh, so that's a great savings and investment question. And I have to give my disclaimer that I don't give legal advice, I don't give investment advice, and I don't give tax advice. That being said, Lauren, what I can tell you is, generally speaking, if you are at an income level that qualifies you for $0 student loan payments, you may not be in the kind of income level that really benefits from those pre-tax contributions, like, contributing to a 401k. When you're contributing to, and in the state, if you're working for the state, you may have different options available to you. I'm not sure if you're at the federal level or at a more local level. The TSP is kind of like the equivalent of the government 401k. But when you're making contributions pre-tax, that means that you get taxed on less income. That's really helpful for high income earners. For if you're on the lower side of the scale, you may want to consider something like a Roth IRA, right? That's going to be money that you put in after taxes, very similar to money that you would have thrown at your student loan, toward your student loan payment. But it's a tax-free account, meaning that the money inside of it grows tax-free. It's a really powerful savings vehicle, and it's really great for young professionals because you have a lot of time to put money into it. It's also money that you can access before retirement age. So if something happens and you need money for a down payment on a house, or you need money to move to Europe, or you need money to change careers, you can access money in a Roth IRA much easier than you can in something like a 401k or from your TSP. There's also just high yield savings accounts, right? It really depends, Lauren, on when you want to use this money and what your timeline is for wanting to have access to it. If, for example, you were interested in saving for a down payment for a house in the next 5 years, then you would probably want to put that money somewhere where, number one, it's going to be there when you need it. And number two, you're going to be able to get it out very easily. Now, generally speaking, high yield savings accounts are really awesome for those kinds of things because they have better interest rates than your typical savings account. Because interest rates are in the toilet right now, even a high yield savings account isn't going to get you very much. But there really aren't many conservative investments that will, just because of where interest rates are. So if this is money that you had planned on putting toward your student loans, putting it into some sort of savings or investment vehicle where it will grow for you over time is going to be one of the best places that you can put it, especially since you weren't planning on spending it anyway, right? So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you so much. I feel better already.
Good, good. These are exactly the kinds of questions that I help my financial counseling clients with. We always talk about how much of their budget should be going toward, toward long-term savings versus their debt repayment plan versus their lifestyle generally. If they want to change careers, how is that going to affect those proportions? We talk about that. We apply it to their numbers. I obviously have a very extensive process that I put people through, which I'm not going to bore all of you with. But that kind of process itself really helps people think about what's important to them and how they would like their money to be working for them. And then when they walk away, they feel better that, number one, they have a plan and they do feel like the plan is actually their plan, not just kind of, some cookie cutter solution that everybody reads out of a popular finance book that doesn't actually work for them. I do have, no problem, Lauren. I did have a question in the chat. Let's see, for law students about to graduate, what should be their first step when they know they have a law student debt and plans to take the bar? So essentially, where should we start? Oh, great question. Thinking back to law school. So there are a lot of expenses that go along with graduating from law school, kind of all in the first 6 months. So it's always ideal the earlier that you can start saving for that experience, for that kind of, post-graduation timeframe. If you can have money set aside for that, that's really amazing because you're going to need cash to live on. You're going to need cash for your, the Barbary courses or any bar review courses that you want to plan on taking after graduation. You're going to need money to actually take the bar exams, depending on how many you're planning on taking. And so having some cash, kind of sitting around so you don't have to go get a bar loan is ideal. I will tell you, I took out a bar loan, the biggest one that they would give me, because nobody ever told me that, number one, what it would feel like to pay all of this back, but also that it was going to be so expensive after I graduated. There were all of these other charges that go along just with trying to become a lawyer after law school. So in an ideal world, you have some cash set aside for kind of those post-graduation expenses. But then the next thing that you want to do is you want to take a look at what is your overall student loan debt load. I am sure that financial aid offices all over the country are still holding those crazy meetings where they put up weird PowerPoints of if you've taken out this much, it could take you this long to pay it off. I know that I went to at least 5 of them. I don't remember any of them. I don't remember caring about paying anything off. I don't remember the only thing that stuck in my head was consolidation, that made things easier. And it was the only thing that I paid attention to. So when you're getting ready to graduate, you should get this from your financial aid office. You should have kind of a whole compilation of, all the loans that you've taken out, the total amount that you owe, the different types of loans that you have. And just like I was talking about earlier, you want to make a plan, right? You want to know exactly what you owe, who you owe it to, what are the interest rates, what are the minimum payments going to be under the different plans, and the online calculators that I'll give you guys links to in the slides will be able to help you figure some of that out. What it won't necessarily be able to help you figure out is what those payments are going to feel like when you start working, right? And if you don't have a job lined up already, then that's an even tougher situation to try to figure all of that out. But so, just coming up with an actual plan of knowing exactly where you are with respect to your total student loan debt load and all of the different repayment options that you'll have available to you, that's where I would get started. So hopefully that answers your question. Is there anyone on here today that is in the middle of their student loan payment journey? Ariella, can you tell us a little bit about where you are and what it's been like for you?
Sure. Frustrating. I mean, like you, I really did not understand. It's interesting to think about in hindsight now that I'm so aware of how much money I've had to and still have to pay back, and how that's impacting how I spend money and how I think about money. But I just never thought about it before while I was in school. And I think part of that is just the way that we're educated about money is not it's not really done in a productive way that makes us realize like what life is, what the reality really is. But I really didn't quite understand what I was getting myself into, so I didn't plan for it. And so the question about law students, I think that if you could have come into law school and, you know, explained like, this is what you need to think about, that would have been great. But what I have, you know, later than I wish I had started thinking about it, but nonetheless, am now more aware of it, and I'm grateful for, not just for paying off my student loans, but just for life in general, is just considering like, what are my values? What's my lifestyle now? What do I want my lifestyle to be? You know, how much money is it going to cost when we, you know, have a family? Like all of these things that I was just going day by day and not really thinking about how the money piece played in and how I was going to manage it long term, and just assumed it would all be fine. So what's been really helpful for me is, I will confess that I have generally, for pretty much most of my life, all of my life, I'm a fairly materialistic person, I will admit that. And so I really had to go through a phase of realizing, you know, well, if I buy all the things, I still have this loan that is just exhausting and stressful. And do I want the things more than I want to have the freedom? And the answer is no. And so that realization of, you know, what you can't spend on everything. And so realizing what my values were and what my needs were and what my realities were and are, has been really helpful in helping me to decide not to buy that thing and to think twice and really consider for myself, is that a need or a want? And so I think as I've developed that mindset, you know, I'm still stressed out about the loans. I don't even actually know if it's stressed out. I'm more aware that I have a lot of loans, but I'm developing a system, and the system is what's making me less stressed about it. I'm a planner, so without a plan, I just feel very unstable.
Never underestimate the power of a plan.
Yeah.
Even if you don't follow it to the T, just knowing there's something there, a framework that you can apply.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, that's kind of been, so I'm still very much in the middle of it, but the plan part and the values and realities and you know, obstacles and lifestyle factors, starting to consider all of that has really been really valuable for me and and again, not just the student loan aspect, but just my overall financial planning and comfort. So more to be, you know, more progress to make, but I'm on my way.
I love that, Ariella, especially since you and I spend so much time talking about financial wellness and how important it is to just know yourself and know what's important to you, because everybody's different. We're all going to have different paths, different things that we want to focus on, and that's okay. Just because, you know, the latest personal finance guru says you have to do it this way, if that stuff isn't important to you, maybe you should do it another way, right? You might have to be a little more creative, but that's, you know, it's your money, it's your life.
Yeah, and that's actually one more point that I'll make that you kind of just touched on a little bit, is figuring out what is the right thing for me and my husband as you know, together, and what we're trying to build, and not looking externally and seeing like, well, what is everybody else doing? And are they buying a house? And where'd she get her clothes from? And, oh, they went, you know, on 12 vacations last year. How'd they do that? I want to do that. And just, you know, we recently moved to California, and we decided from DC, and, you know, so we were already experienced with the high cost of living, but we decided our value is to live as close to the beach as possible. And so we are living 5 minutes from the beach, and we're doing that by, you know, living in a smaller place than we are accustomed to, but we're thrilled to be here. We can go to the beach all the time, and that's what's working for us. We're paying less money than we, you know, if we were like, well, we have to stay in the same side of the apartment and keep all of the stuff that we don't actually care about, we'd be saving less money and be more stressed out. And so just figuring out how to look at, well, what, you know, forget about the rest of the world, just what do I need for myself and for my family, and go from there. It's really, like, I think, step number one.
Absolutely. I do want to recognize everyone who has been here for the 45 minutes. We're a little past 12:45. If you need to drop off, because I know you guys are all very busy, please feel free to. That being said, I know we have somebody else here who has a great story to share, and I want to give her a chance to share with us and for people to ask more questions. I can be here for a little bit longer. I also have to do my whole spiel at the end in terms of the services that I provide. But if you guys need to drop off, go right ahead. You're going to get the full recording. You're going to get a copy of all of the slides. So I just want to make sure that people were aware that nobody's watching them. But Jolene, tell us about your story.
Yes, Jessica, thank you so much for sharing. My story is pretty similar to yours. I didn't have kids in law school, but just, no one really talked about the bar loan. And I just took out everything because I was told that you'll pay it back when you graduate. Don't worry about it. And, that was just horrible advice. So, yeah, it wasn't until, and, I see all these people like, I paid off 225, whatever. I don't even know how much I've paid off. It's a blur. I'm lost. I was just making those payments. And when my daughter was 6, she's 13 now, I got my bill and I finally looked at it because, it was on auto pay and it was so high. And I just was like, wait, when is this going to be done? Not till she's 16. And then I have to save for her college and to help her out. And then when am I was putting a little towards retirement, but when am I going to really do that? And I was just mad. All of a sudden, just one day randomly, I was mad. And so my husband at the time had gone back to school, to a very expensive private art school right after I graduated from law school. His tuition bill was even higher than my law school one. So yeah, and he had much higher interest rates. It was a mess and we couldn't consolidate because I had consolidated right after law school and then we got married and then he took out loans. But because we were married, I was on his loans. So those were considered my loans and I had already consolidated. So we were in this huge mess of paying like $2,000 a month.
Oh,
and
Jolene, I have to tell you, next month's session will be on how to handle couples finances.
Oh God, it was a mess. I was mad. So yeah, so we ended up accelerating his debt payoff and then accelerating mine. And, I still have like, I don't know, 30,000 approximately. And it just, first of all, it's been a relief to get it down, but like you said, sometimes you have to prioritize other things. So, that payoff has slowed down a lot because kids' needs have gone up and, I've had to pay, I've paid cash for those things instead of paying down my loans. And I did come into a little chunk, 10, 15 grand, I can't remember, a year or two ago. And it was like, okay, my car loan is 0%, but I could pay it off or I could pay down my student loan to a third off or something like that. And it was like, it's smarter to technically pay down the higher interest rate, which isn't that high really, or just pay off this whole payment. And it was just like, I had to sit on it for a month or two. And then finally I said, I just don't like having 2 payments. In my mind, that stresses me out. What if something happens to me? It'll be better to not have 2 payments. And so I paid off the car. And so that made me very happy, although I'm still angry about my loans. But they still would have been there either way. So, they are there, but it's just so nice to hear other people admit, they still have theirs too, because things happen or you intentionally don't pay them. And I have to remind myself, I intentionally did not pay that down. I chose to pay cash for some of my kids' stuff and I chose to pay off the car. And there's just life happens. And so, yeah, the income-driven repayment plans always make me very nervous because, when people talk about them, because you need to make a plan for all the what ifs because, kids happen and expenses happen. And, just, you never know when all of a sudden that payment goes up and you're not able to pay it. So, but yeah, so I just want to share with people that there's a million different ways this stuff happens and goes down, and just, know you're not alone with huge amounts of debt that you may not feel you're handling very responsibly, but we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to address these issues, and student loan payback in particular. If it weren't such a myriad of different types of loans, and then, gosh, you throw in, married people and whether they're going to have their payments combined, there's so many different moving pieces. It really is complicated to see what the best path is for anyone, but the best path for anyone is never going to be the same path as the person next to them, because the situations are very different and there's just too many factors that need to be taken into account, especially when you're dealing with mortgage-sized debt. This is not the $35,000 average that we see other college grads graduating with. This is, a really, really big financial burden, and it needs to be treated a little differently than, what the typical student loan advice that you might be getting when people are just talking about, well, make sure that you tackle that first above everything else. If that's what you do, you might spend 10 years tackling it, and then you're another 10 years with no retirement savings. That's not a good look. We don't like that look, so, always things that we want to balance. But I do want to take one last call for any questions or other sharing that people have. All right. I think we had a pretty great session. I was so glad to have you all here. Please stay connected with me. As I said, LinkedIn is where I'm hanging out all the time. So you can always find me there, connect with me there. But also on my website at www.jessicamedinallc.com, you can download my free guide to savvy spending. It will get you started on some of the stuff that Ariella was talking about in terms of figuring out what's really important to you and making sure that your money is actually going there. But again, if you are interested in my financial counseling services, I work with lawyers, I work with law students, I work with lawyer friendlies, and I help you go through all of your financial picture to make sure that it's working for you. And especially if you have any transitions that you're thinking about, I help you think through all of that stuff too. And you can schedule a consult with me. It's free. It's a 20-minute phone call. You don't even have to get Zoom ready, and you can sign up right on my website. But thank you so much, everyone, for coming. As I said, you're going to get a copy of these slides, and there will be additional resources that I have as an appendix to some of those calculators that I talked about, and other resources just to figure out student loan repayment plans. So you'll have access to all of that tomorrow in your email. And other than that, thank you so much for coming, everyone. I really enjoyed it. And I hope to see you at next month's Zoom, where we'll be talking about couples finances and how to handle them. I have a fabulous couples financial coach who works just with partnered peoples. And he's going to walk us through how to have those conversations that can be a little difficult, but so important in making sure that everybody's on the same page. So until next month, everyone, thank you so much for stopping by, and I will see you on LinkedIn.